Okay, so this is my Flex Lab 5 and 6. This is just an analysis of the lesson plan students as creators exploring copyright using the TPAC and SAMR framework. I got this from readwritethink.org, and right away it's a standard lesson for grade 6 to 8, 5 sessions, so 50 minutes long, so it is quite a large lesson, could be almost a unit. And then it is from the publisher note, and the author is Cassandra Love. So just an overview of it. So right here, just an overview of it quickly is students use 5 key questions to determine if they can use a resource. Students practice properly citing multimedia, and students also explore how to and when to protect their own work. So this can be used with any student project, as it states. So for me, I feel that this is a great lesson that gives basic guidelines to apply for all future work. So if anytime students are using another resource or using multimedia, they'll know how to use it, or if they can use it. So the standards and the standards and the objectives, so student standards and objectives, both are for national standards for English language arts from the United States. So immediately these would both have to be, modified. And I chose to use the ICT curriculum modifications, the ICT curriculum for modifications. I chose 4 here that I felt really well grouped what the standards and objectives are. So there's the general outcomes and the specific outcomes. So some general outcomes are just practicing safety when using technology, demonstrating moral and ethical approach to the use of technology, respecting ownership and integrity. Students use electronic research techniques to construct personal knowledge and meaning. So I felt that these would be the best specific and general outcomes to go off of for me personally when teaching this lesson, if I was to do so. Another thing before getting into session 1 here to just keep in mind is that this is a lesson plan created in the United States, so any type of copyright resource needs to be made sure that it fits the copyright Canadian laws, or needs to be replaced. These these other resources would need to be replaced with things appropriate for Canada. So getting right into session 1, I notice CK here. So content knowledge just needs to be initial in order to get into the session. So right away it just says beginning the lesson with a discussion facilitated by a classroom teacher and the library media specialist. So just assuming that I would need to be super knowledgeable about this content, and if I did have the help of a library media specialist, assuming that they would also be very well knowledgeable about this copyright content in order to be able to teach it. And then from there, I kind of go into TPK, so knowing what to ask. So after the content knowledge is known, then I can start using proper technology and proper pedagogical skills. So knowing what to ask, and then knowing what tools help to answer these questions. So for here, it gives the opportunity to ask children what they think it means for something to be copyrighted, and then giving children these websites to go to that they can use. Once again, these have to be made sure that they are well for Canada. Copyright Kids is a website that focuses mainly on the United States, so it's only from the United States, so I could create my own kind of Copyright Kids website, or I could create my own area for the students to go to learn off of and to refer to in the way that this lesson refers to Copyright Kids as. Substitution that I noticed right away is just using websites for answering questions instead of maybe worksheets or handouts with similar information. So session 2, TCK, I find is really here. This is much about TCK, where tech is bringing new knowledge to students through online copyright resources. So the teacher knows the content and where to find the tools to explain it, and to explain that content. And then I find substitution here, with, once again, something like information resources being viewed online rather than on paper. So the copyright domain and the description of public domain. And once again, these would be replaced with Canada. So Canada copyright law, and then their explanation on public domain. And then one modification I noticed was that I could possibly add to this, or that I would use, would just to make it a fuller application of the TPAC framework, would be to maybe only use online resources. So for 6 and 7, there's that copyright organizer handout and then questions to follow. So I would probably just ensure, if I were to do this lesson, that this would be a organizer available online, where kids could maybe go to, for example, Google Docs and view it, and then answer the questions back into Google Docs, or back into a kind of group work where all the kids are using technology and typing to answer these questions, and then they can share it with the teacher, share it with all the students. And then the second modification would be that actual sharing process, where students are in groups working together on the computer, but they're also sharing it through something like Google Docs. So for session 3, I see PCK kind of being the first one. So teachers who create lesson plans need to know the content of what they are obviously trying to teach, but they also need to know how to really incorporate and engage the students. So here there's a lot of talk of asking students, explaining to students, discussing any questions, and also it gives the opportunity for students who want to use a copyrighted work. So there's lots of opportunity here for children to kind of direct their own learning. And it's just basically knowing the importance of student engagement. And then I see TPCK here, which is just shown how the content knowledge the teacher used to make sure these websites are reliable, then actually using these websites and then incorporating them in the lesson. So something like the letter generator, or these fair use guidelines, or the University of Reading. So understanding how to incorporate these, and understanding what's trustworthy and what's not. And then I found that redefinition was here, right here with the letter generator. So the use of the letter generator in order for students who want permission to use certain works. It's basically a sample copyright permission letter that wouldn't be available, this letter generator, without the tool online. Students would have to either create their own letter, or the teacher would have to give them guidelines on letter generator, whereas here the teacher just knows what to give to the students, and the students can refer to it if need be. So session 4, I noticed TPCK, so proper balancing of learning and reflecting, I feel is really demonstrating the TPCK as a whole, because it's just offering more resources after reflection. It's knowing that this is a need and a possibility. So there's more technology resources. It's knowing that there's more technology resources, and then it's also knowing that these tools for direction and just knowing the content of those tools is correct and is proper content. And then obviously all together, just being so aware of the content that as a teacher you're able to understand what knowledge or what content these students are missing. Then I also noticed TPK here with reflection. So just reflection is allowing for teachers to see if the tools are well suited for learning. So whereas the first TPCK had a lot to do with if the children are understanding, or if the children have actually learned what they're intended to learn, whereas here with the second TPK, This is more where teachers can use it as a guideline to say, okay, are these tools working for what my students need to learn? A modification I found would maybe be helpful here to really get the use of technology within session 4 would be to maybe incorporate an online quiz. It doesn't have to be worth marks, but just for a quick assessment of the class to see where the students are at, to see what the students know. And it could be using a website app like Socrative. So this is a free app. It allows to quiz multiple devices at once. The students can just go to a link without having to log in, but the teacher can still get these results. So session 5, first of all, I noticed PK, so the pedagogical knowledge of knowing how to engage the kids on copyright and celebrating their work. So as this lesson comes to an end, the teacher is celebrating the students' work and reinforcing their good work. And I'm sure that the students are very, very familiar at this point with copyright. And I mean, even to me, this each lesson seemed fairly repetitive with the use of somewhat of the same sites like Copyright Works, which I don't think the repetitiveness is a bad thing at all, because I do think that the students really will be able to understand it, but it also gives the students kind of a reward, and I think that's a good way to the release party, is a good way to reward the kids, or to just celebrate their work and let them know that what they're doing is a good thing. They're understanding laws, and they're understanding whether they can and can't use something, which is obviously a very serious thing with the digital world now. So another thing is I noticed with TPCK fully enforced here in the discussion. So technology knowledge and content knowledge for the teacher, or for me if this was my lesson, would have to be shown by knowing proper tools to use that are trustworthy, once again. So directing students to the Register Your Own Works, obviously I would have to be aware of the content that is in the curriculum, and knowing whether these tools are trustworthy, and then asking students to discuss their opinions they may have. So pedagogically, it's good for, I believe, a teacher to kind of once again gauge where her students at. It's a good time for reflection, which is really important to get feedback and to understand what's working and what's not. And then the first modification I found with session 5 would be maybe that more tech collaboration could be incorporated in session 5. So maybe actually stating how the students can share their work. So whether it's with a smart board, or whether it's with a projector, and then maybe the students are creating their work online, or with tools on the web, so something like PowerPoint, mind maps, posters, where they're not just walking up to the class and saying what they learned. It'd be a lot more engaging, and I think that these PowerPoint, mind maps, posters offer a lot more for creativity as well. So that's the first modification. The second modification I found, it has two parts to it, and it's for the extensions part. So obviously right away there are going to have to be modifications made for the Canadian standards. So these Read Write Think provides additional lessons about copyright. So these could be other resources such as Copyright Canada, Creative Commons, FAQs once again. But the second part of this I found too was, you can allow students to go through the process of registering their works if they're motivated to do so. And it also says that they can create plans to raise the money to pay for the copyright registration fees. And I thought that's something that might be interesting, is to maybe, do this through Twitter, or to try and raise this money through online resources such as GoFundMe.com, where the teacher can kind of facilitate it. Or the students could facilitate it as well, just as long as the appropriate age in the terms is allowing for the students to use it on their own. So I just thought that was something that could be a second modification made. And then I also found some redefinition here within session 5. That's just with the Copyright Kids website. I think this is a really great website, although it does follow the US standards. So once again, I would have to either create my own website, using Wix or an online resource like that, or I could just come up with a different type of domain similar to this. But this is really great because kids can go to register their own work. So this is just redefining how kids can really get into the whole copyright realm. So kids can register their work through child-friendly resources on the net, which obviously wouldn't be available or as easily accessible as it is just with this Copyright Kids. So for student assessment and reflection, going over this, I did see some CTPCK in the first point, just because you're having to know how to assess these kids. So I mean, right immediately there, that's the pedagogical knowledge of knowing how to assess your students, and then incorporating the technology knowledge with that. So did they use the technology correctly? And then incorporating the content knowledge by assessing whether the kids understood the content and if the kids can actually produce the same content that I would be aware of as a teacher. And then the second one, the second bulletin, I see a lot of PCK. So pedagogical content knowledge of teachers and the ed professionals or the media specialist, knowing exactly how to observe these students and just knowing to observe these students and to thoroughly ensure that optimal learning and understanding of the content is occurring. So my overall analysis of this lesson plan regarding the SAMR framework I would say it's at the augmentation stage, although there is only I found really 2 substitution points and then 2 redefining points. I think that because it does incorporate a lot of full-on TPCK or TPAC framework, I think that it does fall more to where augmentation is, just because I think that with some modifications, slight modifications, this could move up a level to be at the modification level, but overall this lesson plan is just effective for common tasks like researching copyright laws using technology. There wasn't so much of where students are really creating online. There's not a whole lot of redefinition. So some suggestions I made previously were maybe incorporating having these assignments be completed in form of a poster online, or ensuring that students use copyright laws correctly by getting them to create their own posters or mind maps or PowerPoint presentations. And then other modification I thought of too would be to possibly have students create their own organizer. So there is that copyright organizer handout, and I just thought that if the students created it their own, and then that was assessed to ensure that the students have the right content and the right understanding of how to organize copyright, because of course as they get into the older grades, they're not going to have these worksheets for them unless they keep them, but they will get a little more difficult when they're starting to cite sources in high school and university. So yeah, overall I found it was at the augmentation stage. So that is it for my presentation, and thank you for watching.